Welcome to the Warehouse. Have you ever heard a sermon and thought, how in the world did he discover that? Or where did he get that idea? Every week at Cornerstone Church, two teams dig into the biblical text that'll be taught during our weekend services. We spend hours talking about the text, the context, the culture of the time, you name it. But you can't stuff all that into a 30-minute message. That's where we come in. We're going to show you the stuff in the warehouse that didn't make it to the stage. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Jay.
Hey, what was your favorite spring break memory?
It would have to be whenever I was in 6th grade. My parents pulled me out of like the last day of school and surprised us and took us all to Disney World.
Nice.
Yeah.
You have a favorite memory of your week in Disney World?
I can't think of a favorite besides, nope, that doesn't sound like a favorite. My brother cracked his head open.
Oh, wow.
while we were there.
Why did that? I can't think of a favorite besides
It's not my
this.
favorite. It's not
just
my
one of the
favorite.
most potent memories.
Yes, because he was like running to beat us, like to get in first, like to get in line for the bus. And he like whacked his head really hard on like the metal bar. And my parents all thought he was being like dramatic, and he was like holding his head.
And he had cracked his skull.
And he cracked his skull open. And Disney was
now hold on.
fantastic.
Now, cracked his skull in the sense that he had a cut on his head, or cracked his skull like he had a fracture.
We could see
Oh,
his
wow.
bones
Okay,
on his
no,
head.
not that.
Okay.
I mean, he had to get stitches.
Okay. His head bone wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't a skull fracture.
No.
Okay.
Man, you
So,
guys.
so that's a funny story.
He said
then.
he cracked his skull.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
My
literally
bad,
would be a
guys.
skull
No,
fracture.
but
I mean-
now we can laugh about that story because
Right.
there wasn't.
It
serious
never
trauma.
failed. My brother always got hurt some way, somehow.
Mm.
One time we were having an obstacle course and we had him go first.
Maybe that's the key.
That's a recipe for disaster.
And he jumped over the fence and he was hanging by his collar on the fence
Oh,
like
no.
a fish flopping.
Oh, no.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, he broke his collarbone
Man, oh
on
man.
that one.
Wow.
I don't have any violent spring break memories
No, me
that I
either.
can draw from.
I'm
One of
sorry.
my favorites was relatively recently. So Chloe, our youngest, is 11 now. So she was probably 6 or 7, and one of the spring break we stayed local, but we decided we were going to spend a few days in a hotel, and we went to a certain hotel that's on the Hill Avenue in a certain town in Illinois that we call Marion. And ever since, so that she was 6, maybe 5. And ever since, she would, as we drive past it, she'd say, "Hey, there's my hotel." And,
Nice.
"Hey, are we going to stay in my hotel again, ever again?"
Aw.
And so that was fun. So we just, we swam in the pool and we enjoyed, we got 17th Street once and we got some Chinese and just had a ball staying in the hotel one spring break. That was a good one.
That's cute.
Hey, Nathan, well, what's your favorite spring break memory?
I was homeschooled, so my life was basically spring break.
Yeah.
That's my kids right now.
No, I did do work.
Oh,
I
okay.
did plenty.
I homeschool too. I get it. Wink, wink.
But yeah, so we could pretty much take off, and we like specifically avoided the spring break weeks because it was busy.
Yeah, you get that off-market pricing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we were not like big vacationers either. So like we would go stay with family in Kentucky, or I do remember like one spring break trip. It was with my uncle's church, and we went to Florida and went to the beach. And on the way back home, there was like a real legit tornado that we had to pull the bus over and
Oh,
stay in a
no.
church's gym, and everybody was just freaking out. And
Oh,
we
man.
watched Napoleon Dynamite on a projector. That was a good trip.
Is that when you
Perfect.
figured out you love tots?
I do love tots.
Good.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat a good tot.
Yeah.
Maybe that should have been how we broke the ice this time. Next time,
What's your favorite way to have tots?
how much do you love
cheese with them.
tots?
Yeah, Jay.
Yeah, there's no bad way.
Okay.
Okay, we're excited. Guys, new series. This is my story. We're back exegeting texts and oh baby.
So excited.
Oh baby. You guys are in for a treat today.
Maybe.
We're actually
we're happy about it.
We're excited.
If you just joined us during the last series, you have no idea what we're talking about and you think we're crazy. You're right.
And if you've been with us from the beginning, you do know what we're talking about and still think we're crazy.
That's exactly right.
That part.
Exactly right. So today we're going to be in John chapter 4, verses 1 to 42.
It's a lot of verses.
Lots of yeah, we're coming back with a bang.
Apparently.
Woman at the well.
Ooh.
One of the best. Honestly,
It's a great story.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, it's one of my favorite stories.
Really?
So we're going to be John 4, 1 to 42.
I feel like you always have a lot of favorites when we start. I mean, it's the Bible, so of course.
I got 3 kids, so three favorite kids. Surely I got multiple favorite
Bible stories.
Bible stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We haven't done this in a while. We
Yeah.
we start out with big ideas, right?
Yeah, we go
Is that
big
where it goes?
idea, then we
Okay.
talk about context of the text itself, of the area at the time, and then we dive into our verse by verse conversation, and then we finish with what we're excited to hear.
Nice.
So, man, Nathan, did you have a big idea?
Yeah. So my big idea was this is an outcast's story of Jesus' grace. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. An outcast story of Jesus' grace impacted those around her.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Stephanie, how about you?
Mine was Jesus desires to reveal himself through our suffering and vulnerabilities.
All right. I said, from the beginning, the message has come through unexpected messengers.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
All right.
Parker's was really good. Did you write it down? Nope. Okay. Parker's was good.
I'm out of practice of that too, because usually one of us would write down Parker's because it was good.
Yeah.
And as our producer, he doesn't have a microphone. Though I've been petitioning. So if you guys think Parker needs to get behind the mic, let us know. Parker, do you have yours memorized? It's at home.
He said he thinks so.
Oh,
what was your big
what
idea,
you got?
Parker?
Was God invites us despite our flaws so we can invite others despite theirs.
Ooh, God invites us despite our flaws so that we can invite others
Despite theirs.
despite theirs. Oh,
Ooh. Isn't
See?
that good?
see?
So good.
Man, oh man. All right. Context. What do we have?
Nathan started out first.
I
yesterday.
did.
Yeah.
And that was unusual. So the biggest thing, like getting oriented, John is just like a nice gospel because he just tells us, like, here's what I'm writing about. It's like, thank you, John. We don't have to read between the lines. In John 20:31, he says, I'm writing these things so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So we should read everything through that lens.
That's good.
Yeah. So unlike the synoptic gospels, his main point was not to write in chronological order, but to show Jesus's deity.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that as it starts in chapter 1, where he starts with a poem.
Yep. He has a very different writing style than the synoptics. Like the synoptics tell a lot of the same stories in more chronological order, whereas John is like more Eastern way of writing, more Hebrew way of writing, a lot more like circular and thematic.
Mm.
I just had a thought. Did he do the same? We believe the same John that wrote Revelation.
Yes.
Correct.
Did he do
and
the same
first,
there?
second, and third.
Yeah. Did he tell us why he wrote?
It doesn't
Revelation?
say why, but Revelation is the same. It's not written in chronological order. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things whenever we were studying Revelation, we talked about is that this is not taking place of events. It's focusing on what John saw,
Yeah.
not chronologically.
Yeah.
Are you Googling it?
I was just
No,
wondering
you're
if
good.
he,
You're great.
I was just wondering if he tells us why he wrote John. I was just wondering if he told us why he wrote Revelation.
Because Jesus was revealing something to him and he told him to
Yeah.
write it down.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
So context, Samaria. Remember, several weeks ago now, we heard Michael preach about the story of the Good Samaritan, and he talked a little bit about Samaria there and the friction between Jews and Samaritans at the time. We also see some of Samaria in Acts 8, there where Philip went and preached in Samaria. That Simon the sorcerer, if you remember Simon the sorcerer's story, that was located in Samaria as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is one of the longest recorded conversations Jesus has had with anyone, including his disciples. And this story is significant because of the placement of the story. It's recorded right after the late night conversation with Nicodemus.
Mm-hmm.
So we just get to see the comparison and contrast here of, well, more of a contrast than a comparison. Yeah. Of just like Nicodemus was a man who has a name, and he was a religious leader. He was moral and influential, where the woman is unnamed. She's a woman, and she has an immoral past. There's just this big tension, and we could go on and on with that as well.
I said,
Yeah.
That's good.
And it really it also highlights not just the difference between Nicodemus and the woman, but the difference between like the reception of the Jews versus the people who were not strictly speaking Jews.
Good call. So chapter 3, Jesus and the boys are in Judea. That's the area in which Jerusalem is. He speaks with Nicodemus, like Stephanie said. He teaches in the Judean countryside right after he speaks with Nicodemus. Then he decides to go to Galilee, which is north. So from Judea, traveling north to Galilee, the quickest route would take you through Samaria. But especially the Pharisees, a lot of Jews would have bypassed Samaria and taken the long way around to get to Galilee. So that's something of note, that rather than travel through Samaria to maybe come across Samaritans, that the Pharisees especially would go way around and lengthen their journey just to skip the area altogether.
Which comes into play a lot more whenever we hit verse 4 as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned she's never named, yet her encounter with Jesus is the longest between Jesus and any other individual. And you said especially, even his disciples.
Yeah, which is, I never thought of that or saw that until yesterday.
Yeah.
It was really neat.
Yeah. Pretty phenomenal.
There's a lot of different of like when this was written. So one of the things that I had that said it was written around 70, 85 to 90 is another.
One said around 70,
Right.
One said 85 to 90.
Correct. But there was a discovery of certain papyrus fragments dated around 135 AD required the Gospel of John to have been written, copied, and circulated before then. So
definitely before 135.
Right.
Or 130 or whatever. Yeah.
Correct.
What do you think? If you had a guess, would you say closer to 70 or closer to 85 to 90?
I always just assumed that it was written before the 70 mark because of the fall of Jerusalem, like why can't I use
Temple?
words?
Well,
Yes, thanks.
Destruction of the temple. And
all those numbers come after that, though, right?
Right. Yeah, I
So-
know. That's why I always assumed it was before then, but these numbers say
Mhm.
it was after that.
Yeah.
What did you think?
So I don't think there's any way it's the 135 because I believe it's it's my conviction. I won't say believe. It's my conviction that it seems to me to be the disciple John, and he would not have been alive.
Probably not around at 135.
Yeah,
Even though he was the last one left.
he was.
Yeah.
So I favor a little bit of a later writing period for this because it seems to me like he's looking even and noticing that the synoptic gospels present stuff in one particular way and then going back and kind of filling in some of the gaps. Because one of the stats that was thrown out was that Stephanie, was this you mentioned that the synoptic gospels share 90% of their content, and John's gospel is like 90% unique.
Yeah,
like
not me.
it contains stuff that
But
nobody else has.
I
in
will
it.
take credit for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Stephanie is just
It's probably a Parker thing. What were you?
Well,
she's a
today
genius.
in Communicators, TiVo mentioned that someone mentioned it yesterday, and I couldn't remember who either.
Nice.
So
Did you
if we can't remember, it was probably Morgan.
Stephanie. Oh, okay. It was probably Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah, Morgan. All right. How about you want to start reading verses 1 to 6? You have any other context we need to dig into?
I was just going to talk a little about Samaria.
Ooh.
So centuries ago, the nation of Israel was divided into northern and southern kingdom. In 722 BC, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom, including its capital, Samaria. Many Israelites were deported, and those who remained intermarried with foreigners, leading to blended nationalities and worship. The southern kingdom, which upheld pure worship, looked down upon the Samaritans for their mixed marriages and corrupt religion. Over time, this contempt between Jews and Samaritans only grew. And I think you said yesterday they believed in only the first 5 books.
Yeah, so they held to the Pentateuch and observed the laws and stuff there. So the first 5 books of the Bible. They even had some modifications to the Pentateuch, like particular verses. They had their own Pentateuch. But they would hold like Moses in high esteem and stuff, but then would not believe that any of the rest of the Old Testament was actually canon.
And we'll talk a little bit about that distinction later as well. But you guys both have a tendency to, when you talk about the first 5 books of the Bible, talk about the Pentateuch, and you don't mention the Torah much. Interesting, because those are the same thing. So the Torah is what the Jews would have called it, and we go Latin for Pentateuch? It's Greek.
I think it's Greek.
So the Torah means law or instruction.
Yeah, and then the Tanakh is the rest. The
Tanakh is the Torah, the
entire thing.
Yeah, the entire thing.
like Tanakh, the entire thing. Yeah.
Tanakh.
Very cool. Verse 1 through 6?
Yep.
Oh, so timeline. Northern King. So after Solomon's reign, his sons divide the kingdom. Northern Kingdom gets attacked, and they are departed because they get deported.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
So that happens early in the north. Right. The south, it happens later to the south, and they are exiled. And then when people are sent back to the south, people from the north who were there and who had part of them become Samaritans.
Yes.
Right.
They intermarry.
And so they offered to help the southern guys rebuild, and they didn't want their help. And that was some of the struggle and some of the friction that came up.
Yeah. I love how you explain that. Good job.
Thank you. All right. How about it? 1 through 6?
Let's do it.
All right. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. You know, I got to tell you, I didn't really look up how to pronounce Sychar. And I've just been pronouncing Sychar like the planet in the MCU where Hulk went after he left and was fighting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Third Thor.
What is that planet's name?
Sychar.
Oh.
Whenever you said it, I thought of a centaur, so it's fine.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep rolling with Sychar.
I dig it.
I'm not going to look it up.
I think you should.
I dig it.
What do you guys have? Verses 1 through 6.
So the first thing, well, I guess we didn't really talk about this, Jesus baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize. I think that's an interesting note that Jesus didn't baptize people. It doesn't really say why.
I think we've made our assumptions, though. Have we talked about this before? Where we assume, like, well, maybe he didn't baptize because, like, people have been like, I was baptized by Jesus, I'm way cooler than you. Like, so it's like,
And you know we would have.
Oh, for sure.
There's no doubt in my mind that if like two brothers listen and Jesus baptized one and Andrew baptizes another, you know the one is going to be like, yeah, how's Andrew's baptism over there? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you're right. We end up with later on in the epistles. I mean, you have a like, you know, I was baptized, or I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Peter, and so if they would do that with the apostles, then they would for sure
do that with Jesus.
No
they would have like started a line of like, hey, those who've been baptized by Jesus, we're more holy.
Yeah, you're first in the buffet line. Yeah.
Normally that's me.
Yeah.
First in the buffet line? Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
And I try to get right behind you. One of the things I read did say that was an announcement that Jesus learned. The wording in verse 1 is amazing to me too. Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing. So the thing that the Pharisees heard would have been that Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John. So like that was the announcement. And so John put the announcement in there and then corrected the announcement. So like they heard a news story and John's like, and that's not actually how the news story went.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get that earlier.
Mhm.
I just love the fact that we have that Jesus was wearied. Like, we never picture him as this tired human or that he would get tired or, but actually it just gives us a glimpse of his humanity in this. And so I just really love that we get to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's like, it just makes us think about in Hebrews whenever it talks about that we have a high priest who can like sympathize with our weakness.
Yep.
Yeah. That's good. Oh, and it's the same. So that word for wearied is the same from Matthew 11 that you preached on several weeks ago, that Jesus says, come to me all who are wearied and heavy laden.
Nice. Yeah.
Same word. So Jesus calling to us who are weary because in part he knows what it means to be weary.
So you started down this path earlier, but verse 4, he had to pass through Samaria. So it would not be geographically true that he had to pass through Samaria. There were other routes. There's some debate as to like how common it was to go through. It was a shorter route to go through Samaria. So a lot of what I saw said that like Pharisees and the super religious would go around, but then normal people are like, it cuts, a day off my journey or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go through Samaria.
Because they had to go to Jerusalem at some point during the year.
Yeah. But for sure, because it speaks of necessity here, we should see not just geographical necessity, but we should see like theological, spiritual necessity.
Yeah.
He had to go because that's where the Father's leading.
Yeah, he had an appointment to keep at the well. Yeah. One of the commentaries I read talked about Josephus, the Jewish historian, and not Bocephus, the country superstar legend.
Similar, but different.
Yeah. So Josephus spoke of this as the customary way of the Galileans going up during the feasts at Jerusalem. And when they say going up to Jerusalem, it's because Jerusalem was higher. Galilee was north, but the Galileans going up during the feasts at Jerusalem. The Pharisees indeed took the longer road through Perea to avoid contact with the country and people of Samaria. But it's within the purpose of his life and work to teach in Samaria, as in Judea, that Jesus went.
Nice.
Yeah, I think one of the commentaries I read yesterday said something like he had to go because he was on a mission, and that mission was the woman at the well.
Yeah. The 6th hour would be noon. So it's
hot.
It's hot in Samaria at noon. People generally avoided being outside in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And that's significant context. So it's likely that Jesus and his disciples have been on the road for about 6 hours. They would start their day at 6, which is why they would call this the 6th hour.
Yeah. I also try to avoid doing anything in the 6th hour in the summer.
Oh, it's hot.
All right. Anything else 1 through 6?
I think, did you describe a little bit about why it's called the 6th hour, though? I know you did yesterday.
Oh, just because their day starts at 6. So you count it.
So yes, he did.
6 hours
He
later.
did?
Yeah.
I don't think he did.
It's cool.
Well, no, she's in touch. She knows their listeners out there. They were looking at the turn that they missed.
Nice.
They almost dropped their soda, and so they needed the recap.
Anticipating the listener's needs.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you. That's what I was doing.
The bee's knees.
She's a woman of the people. Go ahead.
Jacob's well. So we got to talk a little bit about this yesterday. This is where Jacob built an altar to the Lord. And we saw that in Genesis 33:20. This established the connection between Jacob and what became known as Jacob's well.
And he gave the well to Joseph in Genesis 48.
Yeah, that was neat.
And it's a well-known, Well known. That I didn't mean that. But,
Well known, well.
well known. Well, it's a well known geographical marker for them too. So everybody would have known if you said Jacob's Well, they all would have known what he was talking about. It
Yeah.
wasn't some obscure water hole.
Right. Like historical places, I think you mentioned it yesterday, but it had a lot of significance to them where us, like, yes, there's places that we find significant, but nothing that would cause worship. And
Yeah, they attached a lot of spiritual significance to it, not
Yes.
just like turn left after Jacob's Well.
Right.
Right.
But like it was places where, where God had met with people and
Right.
stuff. So they would travel there thinking that maybe the presence of God is a little closer there.
Mhm.
Rachel's parents lived close to the Quad Cities for a while, up the north, close to the Illinois-Iowa border. And her dad's directions to get us to his road was turn left at the rock pile. So you're
Nice.
saying there's more to Jacob's
to
Well. All
Did you
right.
know the rock pile when you saw it?
When we saw it, yes. And the
Up until that point, you're like, is that the rock pile? Is that the rock? Maybe there's another rock
yeah.
pile.
Oh, wait. That's
That's
the rock pile.
the rock pile.
Yeah.
That's funny.
How about verses 7 through 10?
Yes.
All right. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water."
Mm.
Mhm.
Oh, you stopped there. I was like, wait, you got to keep going. No.
Oh,
Okay.
I'll go.
Nope.
I'll read
Nope.
as long as you
No.
want.
I was
All
like
right.
waiting. So the important part about like going into this was contextually, it was said that it was at the 6th hour, so it would have been hot.
Mhm.
The chances of a woman coming by herself, one would have been very slim, but her being by herself shows that she could have been an outcast or somebody not really well liked within the community. And then she's not coming in the early morning with the other women.
Mhm.
So just that setting the stage is pretty
Yeah.
big.
Yeah. So the time that she went and the fact that she was alone showed us something's up. So even let's set aside the fact that she wasn't an outcast. Maybe she wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
But there was still something going on with her, maybe in her, that she just, one, didn't want to be around people and wanted to get to the well at a time when she figured nobody was at the well.
Right.
Mhm.
But yet there was somebody
There was somebody there.
waiting on her.
Mm.
Love it. And then also yesterday you talked about how John is really good whenever he's writing. It always has a double meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So specifically with living water, like John loved to do this, to draw out like something that means one thing, but then also attach some spiritual significance to it. Right. So like Nicodemus coming at night, it's like, okay, it's giving a time reference. He came in the evening, but also signifying that it was dark, and Nicodemus was also in the spiritual dark.
Yeah.
So whenever we have living water, I mean, I read that and I'm like, oh, Jesus is a living water. It
Right.
immediately has a spiritual significance to me. But for them, whenever he says that, they just understood the same word that's translated as living water is other places just translated as like fresh water.
Yeah.
Means not stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
So
So a stream versus a pond.
yeah, exactly. And so she would have understood it to just be like really high quality water.
Can I hit a pause for a second? So we have a tendency, right, to read something from our 21st century lenses,
Yeah.
and our context here. What are some ways that you found that you guys help counteract that as you read? Is because I find even looking into the context that of the thing we've been studying has kind of helped me of getting into the brains of people. Not literally. That would be awesome.
Literally into their brains?
Like an Assassin's Creed kind of thing.
Wow.
Ooh.
But so getting kind of into that mindset of, okay, they don't know that Jesus is who he says he is yet.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys have some kind of things that as you read, you're like, oh, okay, I got to go back, got to get back in the right mindset for this. You guys have any tips?
So are you talking about like for here, he says for Jews had have no dealings with Samaritans.
No, him talking about living water and us on this side, we're like, ooh, that's right, because Jesus is the living water. They didn't know that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But they didn't know that. So
Right.
how can we, on this side of the New Testament, how can we kind of help ourselves not do that?
So I try to do my best, like when I'm going through, to ask myself individual words or phrases, like, what did this mean to them?
Mm-hmm.
Just a commitment that, like, it can't mean something to us that it didn't first mean to the original audience.
Yeah.
And so, like, trying to ask myself those questions. And to be fair, like, I know that I don't get every single one of those in every passage on like when we study it. The number of times I've gone back to a passage we've studied previously and found something new, is astronomical.
I think that's almost every time I study something. Like if I was to go back, so Hebrews was one of the most life-changing books for me to read and study. That was like really what grabbed my attention and made me start studying scripture the way I study scripture now.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I feel like if I was to go back and study it now, I would get something totally different. And so I love that you're pointing that out. Just because we get something today, we may get something different next time we jump into it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of like studying God's word.
Yeah. So I start first by like trying to stay super curious, just asking lots of questions about the text and like questioning my assumptions the best I can, which is difficult because like, you know, it's your worldview and it's the water we swim in. So it's hard for a fish to say like, I wonder what other water's like.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing. And then I do find commentary stuff to be helpful as well. Just looking up some experts who look at the history and the culture.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry for that. I thought that might be helpful because that's really good because every time I've heard living water, that's what I thought.
Salvation.
Yeah. It's Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it can, you know, like he was just saying, it's both. And that's good.
And it's definitely what like Jesus intended that double entendre as well. It was just, you know, she would not have understood that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a good point because Jesus does that. And you mentioned John does that a lot. And I have a tendency only to see the single entendre from the Jesus perspective. Right. Yeah.
That's good.
All right.
So his request for water would have actually been viewed kind of scandalous. So kind of just setting that up contextually as well too.
And why is that?
One, he was a Jew.
Yeah.
And two, I think you brought it up yesterday, just like the fact of the well in general. If we look in scripture, we get to see lots of relationships are formed at the well. So Jacob meets his wife at the well.
Isaac as well.
Isaac meets his wife at the well, Moses.
Yep.
And so we get to see that. So wells were kind of like the hookup place. So there may be a lot of singles out there being like, where's my well at?
Yeah, exactly. Where's your well?
At the church camp recently I met at, we had a lot of talks around the water fountain.
It was your well.
And it looked like a well.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
I'm going to have to ask Rachel if this is a true story.
Oh, it's true.
I'm trying to think of, Tia and I would split a cherry Coke pretty much every day at lunch.
The fountain soda?
No, it was just a can of soda, but I think like as I popped it open, it might have been our well.
It was your well.
Wow, guys.
Do you have a well?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Man, if we'd only thought of this during the marriage series.
Could have been super on point, but now it's very tangential.
So the well part being, she could have, we'll get
definitely misconstrued his intent.
Oh, yeah.
And we see that a little bit later on.
A little bit.
Scandalous because he was a Jew. Scandalous because he was a man. She was a woman. Scandalous already because she was scandalous. Yeah.
Yep.
There,
Yeah. And then this just shows how like Jesus is willing to cross any barrier, any gap that may be there to reach those who don't know him.
For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.
Right.
That's one of the things too I read. There was a saying that he who eats the bread of a Samaritan is as he who eats swine's flesh. So as unclean as pork was, as terrible as it was to eat some bacon for the Jews, it was as bad to eat the bread of a Samaritan, to break bread, to eat food that a Samaritan had made. They didn't like those guys.
That's some vitriol right there.
And we talked about it yesterday, but the disciples are actually probably in Samaria, like we assume, because
going to get food.
Right, going to get food. So it's It's so cool. And then he switches from him asking her for a drink of water to switching to living water and how it's a gift from God. It is salvation that is there. It's not an award that needs to be earned, but it's a gift that he is given.
Huh. I didn't really connect those. So I remember you saying that yesterday, and I totally agree, but I hadn't really thought of like him starting with "give me a drink," and then he flips around and says, "If you knew, then you should ask." And it's like, we don't come offering something to Jesus. We don't offer Jesus a cup of cold water, and then he's like, "Okay, I'll give you something." He's like, "If you only knew who I was, then you'd be asking me, and I would give it to you."
Yeah.
It's just neat.
Boy, that's good. Anything else? 7 through 10? I thought you were raising your hand over there.
No, sorry. I was doing a fist bump. No, it's a fist bump.
Oh,
It's-
GTL.
There's so much that you guys can't see that happens.
Yeah,
I mean, like the finger pointing of yesterday about flipping the table.
Yeah.
You guys
Yep.
quickly pointed the finger at me.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do this.
11 through 15. Is that a good spot?
Sure.
Let's do it. The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water."
Yeah. Just here, like she's referring to the water in its tangible form, which, like you were saying earlier, it's understandable why she was doing this. But Jesus, he is speaking about its spiritual sense. While physical water is just temporary, only Jesus has the ability to fully fulfill the needs of human beings. And just you're thinking about the welling up to eternal life. I just picture like this water just overflowing drastically.
Yep.
Definitely. Sir. So she says, "Sir." That word "sir" is the word "kurios," the word for Lord. So most other places where it's seen in the New Testament, we see Lord or Master. And so she's seems to be doing more than just saying, "Hey, hello, good sir." It seems like she might already be sensing something is up here.
I don't know. To me, it seems more like, man, it's really weird that a man, like just in their culture, you know
Like
what
she's
I mean?
keeping
That
him at arm's length.
that a man would talk to a woman he doesn't know like this and ask her. So it seems to me just like, I just read it as respect that was fitting culturally.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, whenever I hear "sir," I want like Parker to do like his English accent, or you can,
Yeah. No, it's all right.
He was in Australia.
but he
still
can
has
do
a great,
it. He has a
great English accent.
yeah,
Yeah.
One of these days we'll get
Hey,
into the
sir,
mic
I
again.
want some more.
yeah. There you go.
And I walked all over it. That is my bad.
It's all right. It's all right. So whenever she calls out, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" There's a couple things going on there. So one, Samaritans would trace their ancestry back to a shared, ancestor in Jacob. So this is a little bit of a dig, just saying like, don't forget, we do have the same ancestry. Like we're every bit as much children of Abraham as you guys are. So you have that. And then you also have her asking a rhetorical question that she thinks she knows the answer to. She's not actually asking like, "Hey, are you greater than our father Jacob?" She's saying, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?"
Yeah. Of course not.
She's assuming the answer is definitely no.
Yeah.
Right.
And how dare you presume? And the actual answer is, well, yeah, in fact, I am.
Yeah. Before Jacob was, I am.
Yep.
Wait, no, that's not here.
Yeah.
That's a little.
But he
further.
doesn't drop that bomb because he is very kind and patient in this
Yeah.
conversation.
Right.
That's cool. Anything else? 11 through 15?
So only through him will we discover the satisfaction we look for so desperately in other things. The only remedy for our parched souls is the living water freely dispensed by Jesus. We must abandon our attempts to find satisfaction on our own and turn to Jesus for lasting satisfaction, which I have a John Piper quote that I knew you guys would love to have.
Go for it.
Okay. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him.
Yep.
Yep.
Probably his most famous quote.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I think it was. That's what it said.
Very cool.
Very cool.
All right. Moving on. We got a big chunk coming up next. Verses 16 through 26. Here we go. Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You're right in saying I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Mm.
This is where it gets real for her, right? I mean,
man.
Jesus is just laying out her story. So go call your husband and come here. Again, this is one of those points where we were talking about, some of the commentary said, the way he asks and the way she responds could be perceived as a little bit flirtatious almost. Like, "Hey, who's your significant other?" Like, just kind of feeling it out, and her saying, "I don't have anybody." There's the potential it could be read that way. Honestly, like, we don't really know.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put too much weight on that, but it's an interesting potential dynamic.
Yeah, interesting. Because that's definitely a ploy by single guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your husband think about you being out here?
Right. Yeah. Either way, that's definitely not what Jesus is doing. And that's very clear whenever you see right after that, "You're right in saying I have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands. The one you have now is not your husband." We talked some yesterday, like this could be a widow situation, like that her previous husbands have died.
Yeah.
It could be a divorcee situation that she's been, or any combination of it,
yep.
Either way, I mean, if it's a widow situation, even though she would not have been sinful in doing that, there are examples like in Jewish literature of them viewing that kind of thing as a curse on someone that would cause all their husbands to die. And so something's obviously wrong with her.
Yeah.
Or if it's a divorcee situation, then like what's going on that would cause you to be divorced that many times?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So even if it is deaths, if she's been widowed 5 times, so even if there wasn't any shame, there's still a lot of pain in this scenario.
Right. And you're almost looking at it though, like Jesus, like he's trying to reveal the root of the woman's, like, what is she trying to find her happiness in almost? You have a face. What is it? Nope. Just drinking her water. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But just who is she constantly trying to seek her fulfillment in? And like, that's so much for us too. Like our root issues, like what is it that we are trying to find our fulfillment in when ultimately it should be Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband.
Which
it seems stating fact. Just here, hey, you're right. Here are some facts.
Yeah. And again, like we talked about this whenever the Sadducees come to Jesus and talk about the resurrection, and they're like, this woman, whenever she gets to heaven, they say like each man had the woman.
Right.
And so there's like a sexual connotation with that. So here in verse 18, it's not just that the guy you're dating, but it implies that like they're shacking up.
You have him.
So even if it was a widow situation previously, she definitely is like living in such a way that was not honorable.
Right.
Yeah. And verse 19 seems to kind of portray that she doesn't feel judged. She doesn't feel shamed.
Right.
Because her response is, "Oh my gosh, sir, I perceive that you're a prophet." So yeah, he's stating fact.
Which I think you said it yesterday was a big deal, her saying that he's a prophet, because there has not been any since Moses for
them.
For them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since they didn't acknowledge, the major and minor prophets or the rest of the Old Testament, they would not have, they would have held to Moses being the last like real prophetic voice. So that said, I'm like, that seems like a very significant thing for her to say. So I wonder if they had some kind of still other context for like, maybe there are some other prophetic voices, just nobody of the caliber of Moses. Because it seems like to come out the gate and say, you're the best thing that's happened since Moses,
right,
because of that seems a little extreme. I don't know.
So, yeah. So maybe there were some lowercase p prophets around.
Right.
Yeah.
So like
that is interesting to note then that he says, you worship what you don't know. We worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. Because we talked about this in the meeting yesterday that the Samaritans, they didn't have the prophecies in Isaiah that pointed to Jesus. They didn't have this stuff, and the Jews did. They had the prophecies that pointed to who Jesus was going to be.
Yeah, but she's throwing out a controversial issue though as well. Like she's not making this like, oh, well, we're right, and she's not trying to make this easy. But he's pointing back to how God was with the Jews, though, through it all. And so that's also pointing back to the Old Testament as well, and talking about all of the times the Lord has redeemed them, saved them.
It feels like deflecting to me, right? So Jesus took it very personal, talking about her and her life.
Yeah.
And she says, let's talk about one of the most hot button issues we could talk about.
Right.
Like, get off my case.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's not talk about that. But then also he like truth bombs her here in like verse 21 when he says, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. Like, he's like, okay, you want to focus on that. That's not important here. Like what's important is the gospel and the truth that he's delivering.
Yeah. They can still see Mount Gerizim where the Samaritan temple is in ruin.
Yeah.
They can see the mountain. And so maybe even in the shadow of it, that they're having this conversation. And he breaks down that geographical distinction. He breaks down that racial distinction between the Samaritans and the Jews. And it kind of gives foreshadowing to Paul saying that there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, because those who worship the Father worship in spirit and truth.
I wonder, so whenever we go back to this is just me pontificating for a second, but as we were talking earlier about like when this was written, so Jesus is talking while there is still a temple in Jerusalem. If this was written after AD 70, John would have had like some additional like really interesting context to this to see like, oh yeah, so the Samaritan temple was gone, and now after AD 70, the Jerusalem temple is gone.
Yeah, because he's done that. In the parentheses so far, he's made some of his corrections. Jesus didn't baptize anyone. His disciples had gone away to buy food. Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. He's kind of adding these information points in there.
Yeah.
I wonder if his mind was like blown right there, like as he's recalling this conversation that.
As the Holy Spirit's bringing it to memory and leading him into all truth, if he's like, oh yeah,
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, they can't even worship in the two different cities. There's not a temple either place anymore. Yeah.
I thought you were going to talk about verse 23. True worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. So like yesterday we tapped on this, like it's this weird period, right, where Jesus is having this conversation with the Samaritan woman, but yet the Holy Spirit has not indwelled yet.
Pentecost hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, Pentecost has not happened yet. I was saying Pentecostal has not happened yet.
That hadn't either. No Pentecostals because there's been no Pentecost. But there have been Baptists.
Yeah. And everybody just found out we're Baptist.
Yeah. If you didn't know.
Now you do. But the really cool part, just talking about that too, like John has already seen the Holy Spirit fall after the day of Pentecost. So like just reading, like writing this, he's probably like, Whoa.
Oh, the things that are coming to mind are blowing them away.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You guys don't get to see
The
all my
things
that-
facial
things that in
expressions.
the moment wouldn't have made sense that like in hindsight, after
Yeah.
all these other things. Yeah. That's
Oh,
cool.
man.
So cool. Okay.
Yeah.
It's spirit and truth. Oh my goodness. Yes.
It's the Spirit in Jesus.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Okay,
good.
I'm excited.
And so then she says, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. I wonder like whether she was putting out a feeler like, hey, is that you? Or is she just again like pushing the pause button? Is that her trying to get out of the conversation?
Or yeah, right. That's one of the things Michael kind of touched on in our communicator meeting is she's kind of spent this entire conversation kind of diverting
Deflecting.
things and getting the attention away from herself. And maybe this was another one of those times.
Yeah. She's like, we can't really, there's no way of knowing, but whenever the Christ comes, he'll tell us.
Yeah. He'll tell us all things. So you can be quiet now, stranger at the well.
But in verse 26, he says, I who speak to you am he.
Yeah.
So this is the first of the 7 I am statements in the book of John. He is saying, I am God, I am he, and he is showing grace towards sinners. This is the first time it was given, and it was given to a woman who was a sinner. Like he could have given it to Nicodemus the night before, or anyways, he could have given the chapter
Who knows
before.
the
We don't know if it was
chronology?
the night before. But John specifically showed that the first I am statement was to this woman.
Samaritan
Yeah.
woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so amazing.
It really is. He spoke in the third person to Nicodemus that when he comes, when the Son of Man comes, and this is it. And the structure of the sentence is, I who speak to you, I am. Taking us back to God telling Moses who was going to go with him. You tell the people, I am, is who
And
said.
she would know that part too, like, because he's the great I am. Anywho, and then just the other part, like, he could have said it to his disciples, like, but no, the first one to receive this is a woman.
Yeah. And I wonder if John writing would have said, he told us this. He used the same language to us before. If so, to your point, if this was the first time he said it to anyone, it feels like if it wasn't, John might have snuck in there and said, although he had told us and we didn't get it yet, or something.
I was just thinking of like in the first people who saw him when he was
Resurrection.
Yeah.
was women.
Oh yeah,
So just he's definitely breaking the bounds here.
yeah. He spent his entire life breaking those
Bounds.
bounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just thinking of this. So we talked about that during our Advent series that in the Hebrew, Jesus' name was Yeshua, and we had a long conversation about Yeshua. And so here he would have been speaking probably Hebrew to this woman, and so he would have said, I who speak to you, Yahweh, right?
I don't know. Didn't they speak Aramaic by this time?
They may have been speaking Aramaic, but so would the Samaritans have been as well?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm out of my depth there
Same.
to say
Yeah,
for sure.
same. But and that's one of the things I just thought of that is oh my goodness. So I am. So in the Greek, it's yep. I lost it. I had it written down and lost it. But so the Greek I am is different, of course, than the Hebrew I am. But yeah, it's just something I was thinking of. Anything else for that long chunk? All right. If not, we'll go 27 to 30. 27 to 30. Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? So the woman left her water jar, went away into town, and said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? They went out of the town and were coming to him.
Yeah, so the big point that stuck away for me was that she left her water jar. So she walked all of that way to fill up her water at the well, and it wasn't even important to her anymore, and she just left it.
Or yeah, or I had a couple things that I just some notes that I wrote down. Some things that I had read. Did she leave it for them to use? Maybe she left it for them to use because she knew Jesus didn't have his big gulp cup ready to go. Did she leave it to mark her return? Like, all right, I'm leaving this here because I'm going to be right back. Don't go anywhere. Did she leave it because she was overwhelmed with the message? Like, yeah, she came to get water, but like you said,
She was overflowing with water.
Yeah.
Eternal.
definitely could have been. Or did she leave it because she wanted to get to the other people to tell them as fast as she could? And so carrying this huge water jar would weight her down a little bit. So did she leave it there for speed? Like, did she take
Man, you really thought this out.
Yeah. I did.
like it.
Did she switch her Crocs to athletic mode and put the strap on the back so she could get on down the way? Yeah. And I don't know. So
I've never thought of that being athletic mode.
yeah.
And it cracks me up.
Yeah. She left her jar.
So I mostly read it as, the significance of what's just happened in my life makes the reason I came here just like pale in comparison.
Yeah.
So you see the urgency, the Messiah is here. I got to go tell somebody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like you see similar patterns, right? With like the shepherds leaving their flocks whenever they're like, we got to go.
Yeah.
We got to go see.
Because the flocks would have slowed them down.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not because the flocks would have slowed them down.
Yeah. I'm like trying to, I guess it doesn't really matter. We're trying to like get into the minds of it. It's like, I don't know how much of it's a conscious decision. Like, how long will it take me with the jar versus, or if it's just like, man, I gotta go tell people the urgency of it. But it doesn't really matter, probably.
And she said, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to me that as John wrote, we don't know, we talked yesterday, we don't know what they said. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that what John says that she said didn't include the part about Jesus telling him in that moment that she was the Christ.
Oh, that he said that he is? It's just can this be the Christ?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's talking about what she experienced.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And her conclusion that she's like toying with, not even necessarily convinced, but
like giving them a bit of a cliffhanger to come and see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so she goes into town, tells them, and then they come out to see him. That's kind of like the comprehension point of it. That's what's happening in the story.
Yeah.
Oh, a little bit down. Wait.
No, that was in verse 29 and 30.
Yeah.
So she tells them, and then they come out
went
to
out
see
of
him.
the town and they were coming to him.
Yep.
Cool. Got it.
Yeah.
So many verses.
It's a lot of verses, but we're almost done.
Did you already say the marveled thing?
We didn't talk about the marvel thing.
We just talked about yesterday, like the marveled here, like could it be negative or positive? And I think, Nathan, you came back and said it could mean both.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But then somebody found it more of a
27. Gotcha.
Yeah, more of a positive.
It's
like
most of the
awe.
uses were positive. They were in awe or amazed, but there are examples of it being used negatively as well. So it just has, it's like primarily just they're shocked.
Amazed. Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody is there though. Like it says, but no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking to her?
Yeah.
It's almost like they knew Jesus's intentions wouldn't have been negative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me playing too much of a part into it.
Yeah. Astonished, I think, was
that's
one of the ones we used.
That's a good one.
Like astonished is
It's
kind of
neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just about the emotion. It doesn't describe like whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah. They weren't horrified and they weren't overjoyed.
It's just like, he's talking with a woman. This is significant.
Yeah, but but they didn't ask him about it. It's like they trusted him on why he's talking to her.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Very cool. How about, oh man, I'm going to go the rest of the passage. How about it? 31 to 42?
you can do it.
All right, here we go. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. Already the one who reaps is receiving wages and gathering fruit for eternal life, so that sower and reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. Many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. They said to the woman, it's no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world.
We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about 31 through 38 yesterday because it's focusing a lot on the disciples' response, but it is still significant here. I guess like if I were summarizing it, I would say that that Jesus has just such an understanding of like what really truly satisfies, and that like he is very focused on what it is that the Father's called him to do, and is not obsessed over food.
Yeah. So I chuckled really hard at this yesterday, and I was still chuckling whenever Jay was reading it. But when the disciples are urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat, which like, who's like, this is a good friend. It shows like, man, they're such good guys, making sure that Jesus is eating. And then he says, I have food to eat that you do not know. So the disciples, I just picture them looking at one another like, did you feed him? I didn't feed him. Yeah. Did you give him a sandwich?
Where did he get food?
Yeah. So I just chuckle.
It is funny.
At it.
I wrote, so I make a doc. I got it from Nathan. Make a little Google Doc about our exegesis thing, and then we highlight it and comment the areas where the things we talk about. And this I highlighted, has anyone brought him something to eat? And I wrote a note that said, I'm thankful for how blockheaded these guys were. and how, because they're the ones who were kind of responsible for telling the story for a long time. Yeah. They were humble enough to put in these parts, because John very easily could have said, just skip that part altogether. Right. He could have just jumped to Jesus saying, wow, the harvest is here and it's time. But he said, yeah, one of us asked another one of us, did you guys feed him? I didn't feed him. How'd he get this food?
Which you can just totally imagine them like busting a gut laughing about how much they didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. It was one of the sounds after the Holy Spirit fell on Pentecost, them just collectively saying, oh,
this is what he meant.
That
makes sense.
Yeah.
So back to this, another part is verse 35. Jesus questions the disciple, asking if they believe they need to wait for the harvest. He points out the Samaritans are already responding to the gospel and emphasizing the urgency of the gospel. Jesus urges his disciples to share the gospel immediately without waiting for a better time. The time for the harvest is now. And if that doesn't speak to us about sharing our story and the importance of letting other people know, our response to the gospel feeds and helps like the harvest.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good. These blockheaded disciples, this lady with a past, he's telling us, lift up your eyes.
Yeah.
See that the fields are white for harvest.
I really like in verse 37, whenever he talks about one sowing and another reaping. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. That says a couple things to me. So one, that like there are going to be people I'm going to encounter that are ready to receive the gospel, that I should be like ready to help bring in the harvest. And then also an expectation that there are going to be times that I'm going to be the one doing the sowing as well, that someone else is going to get to reap the harvest. It just really encourages you to like in all of these relationships you have with people who don't yet know Jesus, like do your part, whether that's just sharing the gospel today or whether it's getting to be a part of the reaping of the harvest. You don't know. Your job is to be faithful.
Yeah. Like we are not the ones who win the souls.
Right.
God is the one who rescues sinners graciously. But we get the front row seat to be seeing what he is doing through us and through people.
Yeah. And we mentioned, you mentioned that tie into what Paul would say later, even adding in the waterer, that we neither were the ones who sowed the seed, nor were the ones who reaped the harvest. And yet even us telling our story and maybe not seeing any bit of any action, yet still we're there. So, man, sow, water, reap.
Yep.
I like it.
And that's just amazing that in verse 39, you have many people believe because of the woman's testimony. So, I mean, just because she said in the very basic sense what had just happened to her in her encounter with Jesus, she didn't have a depth of theology to really explain it or a method to be able to say, like, here's the 4 spiritual laws. She just said, come see this guy. I want to talk with you about Jesus because he's amazing. And several people believe because of that. It says many, not just several. And then you have Jesus come into town and stay for 2 days, and then many more believed. So there were some people who didn't believe just on the front end, but then after spending some time with Jesus, then they come to believe.
Yeah.
And all because she simply just told her story.
Which I think we talked about this yesterday as well, but like it doesn't matter how long you've been following Jesus for, regardless if it's 5 seconds or 20 years or 100 years, like share your story. You don't know how much you can impact somebody, and you don't have to know all of the theological answers. And a lot of people get scared or stumbled and they may answer a question wrong, and it's still important to share.
Yeah. Jesus entered her pain and more than likely her shame.
Yeah.
And she let him redeem it.
Yeah.
And she went and told people about it.
And he turned it into a story that like brought many other people into eternal salvation.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
man.
so good.
31 to 42. Anything else?
I don't think I had anything else.
All right.
I don't think so.
Man, we're back.
It's so good.
Exegeting.
Right.
I love it.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. And man, any questions, let us know. We're always here, ready to give our best.
If you
I
think
actually go home and sleep. I'm not always here.
You're
just not 24/7.
You're not.
Not always here. You guys might be.
So I can go home. Man, nice. All right. Well, heck, guys, I'm gonna head out. But I think that's the most important thing we can hear, though. That if
we go home.
Yeah, we go home and we let Jesus into our story, and He's going to turn that story into something magnificent.
Yeah.
And He's going to use it to further the gospel.
Yep. Love it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys. We'll see you on the flip side. Say bye, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.